Okay, I'm gonna. It's time to talk about the elephant that's in the room.
There we go.
Because I'm. We are going to have different opinions on this. With the existence of Steam Deck now, and to a certain extent with the existence of Proton for the last few years, but especially now that the Steam Deck is kind of, in my opinion, blurring the line between gaming on Linux a little bit. Do you think that it is still? Do you think that we still need Linux native builds of games? Because this is something that a lot of Linux enthusiasts have been craving for years, and they're getting it less and less. Now, do you think that the Steam Deck will encourage developers to like make Linux native builds, or will they just test it against Proton and be done now? What do you think? What do you want to see happen? I guess kind of open ended, but
Well, what we've already seen is quite a lot of developers are already now testing themselves against Proton with their Windows builds and putting in fixes that benefit everybody, which is a huge thing. So it's not just deck players that will benefit, and everybody. I think that's an important thing to focus on as well. In regards to specifically going either native or Proton, though, it's right now it's a question of, is it worth it? And the answer a lot of the time is, well, quite simply no, because the market share is not there. Proton is a great stepping stone to just having your game work, but the one of the downsides there is that if you're relying on Proton, then you basically have no control over the distribution of the game and what's happening with it. While Proton is amazing for what it does, the other side of it is that developers who produce a native version have that entire control over everything. They can optimize every single angle of it and do whatever they want, and then they can go and put that on other stores. Say if 10 years down the line Linux becomes way more popular, if these other stores are not allowing or don't have features for Wine and Proton, they can then put those Linux builds on it. But that's pie in the sky stuff right now. That doesn't really matter. The point is that for now, ensuring your game works in Proton and updating it to have good controller support, making sure it has good performance, that benefits everybody, literally everybody. The only people that are only going to go for native Linux ports are a minority of a minority, and they do not have the purchasing power for a developer to care. Really. But then also, since the Steam Deck was coming along, there's actually been quite a few brand new native ports suddenly crop up at the same time. So it's like, I think there's genuinely space for them both. It all depends what developers know, I think, and what developers can do and support. The point is, what's the best user experience?
Hey,
now,
and
what is the
speaking
best
of-
user experience? Go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
Speaking of user experience, one of the games I played the most on any PC, any device is Total War Warhammer 2. I have like 500 hours on that game. That game has a Linux port. That port gets all the DLC 1 month after the Windows version. It gets the updates 1 to 2 months after the Windows version. It's less well optimized, it runs less well, and it cannot cross-play with Windows or Mac players. I'd rather just have the Proton version, which runs incredibly well, better than the Linux version, have all the updates, all the DLC. Some Linux ports are super well maintained and work really well, but some are just... I mean, it's feral. They're doing a great job, but they're doing with what they are given. And I think they're given the new build, like, we released it for Windows, now port it. And they can't do more than what they're already doing, but in the end, the user experience is not great. And so that's why I don't care if they make a Linux version, because I'll still play the Windows one instead.
Yeah.
When it comes to Feral as well, I mean, their technology isn't exactly too far away from Proton because they have their own translation layer. I believe they call it indirect X.
That's nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like when you go in some of the games, it mentions very clearly indirect X. Their ports the newer ports anyway that are using Vulkan generally do perform quite well, but yeah, they do have that issue of getting it all done later, no cross-platform. I think ports like theirs are absolutely a dying breed because they're porting after the fact with their own translation layer that a lot of the time isn't as good as Proton anymore. And Proton's only going to get better and better because Valve and Codeweavers have infinitely more resources. But then you have the other side of it when you have ports like Ethan Lee. A lot of people would probably know. He's called like on Twitter like Fibbid something.
Flibbida Jibbibo.
Wow.
How do you say that?
How do you know that?
But he's the complete opposite side of the spectrum when it comes to this because he created FNA, which carries on the legacy of XNA from the Xbox days. He also helps work on SDL, and he has ported like 60 titles now, and he maintains them all, and they all work like last I've gone through them amazingly well. But he is only one person. It's a very tough question because user experience is the most important thing. Proton gives people the games straight away at a lower cost.
Yeah,
and really, I think it's the future because
it also
what's up? You got
also really depends on the developer and what their budget is. Like if they have someone on hand who is a Linux user who has the experience to do that stuff, that's really expensive. Like he could go somewhere else and get a job and make a lot more money. You know what I'm saying? So like if you have like Ethan Lee and you hand off a port to him, that's great. And that if your studio can afford it, and if the Linux port of the game sales can afford that, that's great. But then like if you're like a small indie dev and you've made your own engine to publish this game, you're gonna have a lot more trouble, and it's more trouble than it's worth, honestly, to port your game natively to Linux. In a lot of cases, you're just not going to see that return on investment. Maybe with the Steam Deck you will, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
it's still a question.
Proton provides the bridge to allow developers to bring their games to Linux without having to do any of the like arduous work or hiring the talent to do it, and that's a good thing for Linux gaming. Once the Steam Deck is established and the developers really like, and it's been on the market for 2 or 3 years, and developers want to take advantage of the hardware, that's when the native ports will come out. That's when Valve will give them more access to the drivers, like the lower levels, and you'll see ports like Grand Theft Auto 5 for the 360 on the Steam Deck. You know what I'm saying?
So you'll see like Steam Deck you'll see Steam Deck verified, but maybe also Steam Deck optimized.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Now that would be something I'd really, really like to see at some point. And I don't care how it's done.
Yeah.
Just a point of fact that a developer has gone in, tweaked it specifically for the Steam Deck, and they can show, Valve through some verification, here's what we've done, here was the increase, and say we are going to continue supporting it in that way, whether it is Proton, native, whatever. Deck optimized. Yeah, that's actually, I want it.
I've seen a lot of comments on my YouTube channel like in the last couple days. After they changed the after Q2 to Q3 and after Q3, people are saying, "Oh, I'm after Q3 and now I'm really worried because the hardware is going to be so old by the time I get it that no games are going to work." And I'm like,
"No, it's not a Switch.
No, this isn't a Switch. But even the Switch, like that is 7 years old. You know, like that hardware is ancient in terms of compute. Yeah, the hardware.
It's basically like a 6-year-old phone.
It is.
That's basically the hardware.
It uses the NVIDIA Tegra. That's what was on the first NVIDIA Shield thing that you put under your TV on the Ouya. It's the same hardware.
It's not that old.
It is. Not the Switch itself, but the hardware is ancient.
The architecture is. I mean, it's semi-custom, but still very old. Yeah.
Crucially,
I've got a day one Switch.
Yeah. But guess what, Liam? You can still play AAA games that are coming out for the Switch now, even though that hardware is so old. And this is what the Steam Deck is. Like, this is a paradigm shift in the PC gaming space, in my opinion.
I've got a note on that, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
So you can play AAA games or AA games still on Switch now, right? Okay.
Well, I'm saying,
Has
like,
anyone
Kirby.
tried Ark Survival Evolved on the Switch?
Oh my gosh, that's gotta run like awful.
I'm talking about the new Kirby game, though.
Worst ports ever made, and yet the deck can play it quite nicely.
Yeah.
But
Nintendo has Nintendo has the advantage of having, you know, developers making games just for that, like all the optimization and the development tools that. Oh, that's another thing we didn't even talk about yet, is the fact that the dev kit is open source for the Steam Deck. There's so much to talk about. Jesus Christ.
So on the point of people waiting on the Steam Deck, so there's a lot of disappointment and obviously a lot of people waiting, people not getting it to Q3. Some people won't even get it till next year. And people worrying about what the hardware will work on. Well, you look at stuff like the Switch. It is completely outclassed to the point that now multiple games are cloud versions because the Switch simply cannot run them.
Mm-hmm.
And yet those same games, the full entire version will run on the deck. And it will run today, it will run tomorrow, it will run next year. And games will be coming out next year that will run on the deck and the year after, you know?
Yeah. People tend to forget that this thing runs game at 720p or 800p. It's not like it's a 4K gaming thing that, of course, would be outdated in 2 years. It runs games at 720p or 800p. It's got FSR that can allow you to basically have 800p even though it's actually rendered at 540. And it also has access to all the graphical details and settings that you can change. So if a newer game releases, you can still crank it all the way down to low, render it at 540p, and FSR will upscale it. You won't be able to tell the difference on such a small screen, and it's going to be a good experience at 60 FPS. It's something that the Switch cannot do yet, and I don't think it's going to be able to do it.
I did that.
I think this hardware is going to be relevant for a long time.
I did. So now I don't know if this is a particularly relevant example because it's not. They're not new games. But I was playing around with Master Chief Collection last night, and specifically Halo Reach, which is one of the newer ones in that collection. And I was able, in desktop mode, I was able to get 1440p, 45 FPS with enhanced graphics.
Damn.
When I activated FSR, I could max out everything and get 60 FPS at 1440p. And then I moved it to the deck, and I just, with FSR on and off, like going 540p to 800p, I think, I just couldn't tell a difference. And I've tried that with many games, and I can't see the difference, but I can feel the difference.
On a 4K screen, you're going to see the upscaler. You're going to see the blurred edges. You're going to see like some kind of weird triangle pattern on the textures and stuff like that. On a 7-inch or what is it, 7 or 8-inch screen, you're not going to see it. It's too small. And even if it's close to your face, you're not seeing it. So it's virtually transparent. It's just more performance, more battery life for no drawback.
Yeah, I really think that you'll be able to play games that are released for the next 5 years easily because of the fact that they're PC games and they have so much scalability. It's I love this thing so much.